Okay. I don't think we have a quorum. But anyway, we will go ahead with the meeting. See, we have quite a few people on the line. I don't believe we received our minutes for the September meeting. So, and we'll dispense with that. And as I mentioned, the data request information will not be forthcoming at this meeting. Is there someone here who represents Medicaid on the call?
Dr. Terrio's here, but I'm a very poor substitute for Pam.
All right.
Rick, Pam emailed both of us and said that she would be at this meeting.
Okay, we'll just wait then.
It looks like Pam just joined.
Okay, great. Pam, are you with us?
Winston, no. Oops.
Pam, are you on the line?
I am here.
Oh, I see you. Very good.
Sorry, I was having trouble getting the it to load on my computer this morning.
Oh, everything's bad on Mondays. I mentioned that we won't be going through that data request today, but we'll be reviewing that, sounds like later this week.
Yeah, I added I sent you and Amy back a note. I added Colette on there to work on getting the time scheduled to go through all of those.
Okay, well, I have plenty of time this week, so I'm sure we can get that done. We're dispensing with, I don't think we have a quorum or the minutes, so why don't we go right on to the ARPA funds update. We have a plan tentatively approved by the federal government, is that correct?
Yeah, we had our initial spending plan was partially approved. There were some things that they wanted additional information on, and we've submitted that back to CMS, so they have that. But we also were awarded, we applied for and were awarded free technical assistance through Advancing States and several other vendors. There was some money through several organizations that were given to them that allowed them to provide free project management technical assistance, and we were one of the states that received that. Now it's short term in that it really is just to get the initial project plan documented and to get states started. It goes through the end of November, but we've been working with our consulting group, and actually we were just meeting with them and setting up our initial project plan and starting to line out the task and assign all of the owners and that piece and starting to move forward. So it'll be there's some that B did is taking the lead on. There's some that's Dale that's taking the lead on, and there's some that of the tasks that Medicaid is taking the lead on. And I have a report that I have to send, a quarterly report that has to go to CMS today. But we have not, really, outside of starting to plan, have not been able to do much.
Yes, and I see it's for $500 million.
So
That's quite a bit more than we had thought earlier, isn't it?
So, and that money, we don't get awarded. That was the projected amount.
Mhm.
On what, because our match rate is different if it's an administrative task or if it's a service task. So, or if it's a certain, if it's on services, we get a higher match on services. So that dollar amount is really in flux in that, it can change depending on what we, the amount, or if it's an administrative task. So some of the things like, for example, doing the rate study, which we have to do, is it a lower rate, a lower match rate than the actual, once we implement the services or do the changes to services, or like the acute and crisis services that are on that plan. So that number it's not guaranteed that we get that amount of money. It could be less than that. It could be, I doubt we would ever see more than that, but it all depends on how, what we use the monies for and how, because it all depends on the match rate. So I think there was some confusion initially. People thought, okay, we're going to get that amount of money. But really it is based on our, what we claim, with CMS, our match rate that we claim for the period of time that is in effect.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it seemed to be more than what we had anticipated early on, right?
It is. We're going to have quite a bit of money to spend either way, and we have until March of 2024 to spend the money.
I see the number one thing here is supporting and growing the Hcbs provider base. And I saw some of this money will be used for recovery payments of lost income. Is that how I should read this?
So what part of what we are doing, yes, is looking at how do we do an immediate infusion for the providers? What do we do to immediately help the providers? And we actually are working on an Appendix K amendment to do something to help with that as well. But yes, that is part of the plans, is looking at what can we do to bolster the providers, both short-term and long-term.
So will that take a while to put that plan together? I mean, the Appendix K, and I mean,
that's something I'm hopefully we'll have that into CMS by the end of this week. So that's something that I want to go ahead and get to CMS. Now, longer term, what it's going to take is, that any long-term relief, the rate study, we have to either begin a new rate study or complete the previous work that was done on the rate study. So that one is more long range. It's going to take a little bit to get there, but we recognize the importance of doing something to give providers an immediate relief, because we have been providers have really been struggling, some of them, and we understand that. And it doesn't matter if we talk about slots and wait lists, and it doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if we were given 5,000 slots. If we don't have providers to take care of the people, you still have people waiting for services. They're just not on a wait list now.
that's
You have to, you really, all of it fits together in a puzzle. And so, Amy, I think I just saw a question in the chat. So Appendix K, what we're looking at is a temporary rate increase for some of the services like case management and personal assistance and supported employment.
So these
Pam,
are,
do you mind if I ask, would that continue to extend the residential 50%? Will that still
It's
remain?
still in place. That doesn't, that is still, we're not doing any, so that will stay in place. We're not looking at rolling back any of the current approvals that are in. So like the availability for PDS individuals to get overtime, the expansion of home delivered meals, the bump in rate for residential, none of that changes. That all still remains in effect.
is it still up in the air? I mean, it's not an across the board rate increase, or are you selecting particular services for assistance, or?
We're looking at, right now, we're looking at the utilization and the and where the losses have been, or where there's been struggles in providing services. So
Like, can you give me an example?
like, for example, case management. So you have HCB that gets $100 for case management, and you have brain injury that gets $434 for case management a month. So, and we're really asking it to be them to do the same types of activities. Same thing with personal assistance. The rate varies dramatically across the waivers. Really looking at those hands-on the services that are suffering right now.
Would that be like CLS and community access? Would that be another example?
That could be.
Could be. Sounds like it's still up in the air quite a bit. When do you think these revenue or rate enhancements will start? This business about recovery of payments. Do you have a goal as to when that would begin?
I think that work stream we're actually is meeting this week. So no, we're starting on it this week. There's just a lot of, I wish I could make it really easy and could just like wave a wand and make it happen. But there's just so many activities that go into it. But I mean, we understand that it is critical it is critical to get the providers some relief, because workforce though is a complex problem, and it's not just I was looking back at some of the things we were talking about, workforce issues way before COVID. And then looking at some of the, you can drive down the road and see now hiring, or text for an interview, or just about everywhere. So it's a complex issue, really balancing what do we need to do. Obviously money is part of the answer, but then also looking at what do we need to do to strengthen the workforce in general. Is there training pieces? Is there career ladder? So we're really trying to, so I think this is going to be a long range activity. Initially it's getting people an infusion of some kind of funds, whether that's via Appendix K, whether that's when we increase rates or how we do that. But ultimately money is not the only problem that is plaguing workforce, and I think that we have to try to really address all of it. And I think we're going to ask for stakeholder feedback and engagement to make sure that we get it right. We want to make sure that we do things that really go to solving the problem.
Well, one of the things we've been going around quite a bit on, as you know, is the assistance for residential too. Those independent contractors. Are you considering using some of this assistance to address that issue?
We are looking at we are looking at all of the services. One thing that we've learned on the residential 2 part is, we say that people, when they're in an FHP, that they're part they're part of the family, but yet we don't give that individual any opportunity for, right now, outside of Appendix K. Now, we did this in Appendix K. They have, the opportunity to have help with respite, or maybe some personal assistance, but we don't really support them like you would anybody else that is a typical family environment. So really, we are going to look at that and see how to share that service and what the best answer is. And Myra, we are not decreasing any of the rates through Appendix K. The rate will either be the same as it is today, or it would be increased. We're not going to decrease any of those rates through Appendix K. And in fact, that's actually against, CMS would not allow you to do that. But that is not our plan in any case to do that, but that is not allowed.
Well, it seems like we're talking about these two items in conjunction here, the funds update and the workforce crisis wages reimbursement rates. Does anybody have any comments they would like to make on either of those two issues?
Rick, if you wouldn't mind, this is Amy. I just wanted to make a quick comment. First of all, Pam, thank you for obviously immediately addressing some of these rates with Appendix K. It's, more than anyone that, there are a lot of providers out there who are having a lot of problems. And workforce is obviously the biggest issue. And like you said, it's multi-layered. We can't increase utilization without workforce. We can't get more workforce without paying, being able to offer competitive wages, and we can't offer competitive wages unless we have higher reimbursement. So, definitely really, really, really appreciate that. As you all know, a coalition of 1915C associations and providers presented to the 1915C task force, the legislature, 2 weeks ago. What's the last meeting, I believe? And we presented a plan, an ambitious plan, I will admit, that we would request the legislature to assist and authorize Medicaid and fund this request to implement a 25% rate increase for all waivers and all services across the board that we feel would really, that would allow providers to raise wages to be competitive. Recently, a study came out last Friday, a national study indicating that Kentucky would have to, if the minimum wage went to $15 an hour, Kentucky would have to raise its across the board reimbursement for waivers by 25%. So that number was pretty spot on in our math, thanks to Steve Shannon. And in that request, we also asked that the residential be maintained at the 50% increase for the 24-hour service for ABI and SCL. We can't wait to work with the legislature to help secure that funding so that, as Pam likes to say, so we can give them the money tree so they can shake it and hopefully help providers a little bit. We'll see what happens, but thank you, Pam, for taking this big first step. I think that helps everybody get to the end goal of getting everybody some more funding. So appreciate that. Thank you.
When we say a study, do you think we'll be doing another cost study like we did back with Navigant, Pam? It's like start from scratch or use some of that information that's already been collected for the study that's being mandated?
I don't have a 100% answer to that. I mean, I would hope that some of the information that had been and the work that had been done initially would at least be used as a foundation for that, but there will be, I think, some additional data gathering.
Yeah, because how long did that take, the gathering for Navigant? Wasn't that at least a year?
It was a big, that was a huge undertaking.
So if the
So,
idea is to get assistance out soon, perhaps we won't do that again. Anyway, wouldn't you agree?
it's important to make sure we get it right and that we
Right.
have all of the input that we need.
I understand. Any other comments on either of these two issues on ARPA funds or reimbursement rates? Any stories? Okay. Unbundling of services, clarification remarks at the 1915 waiver task force. Was there some confusion on that, Amy, or a need for clarification?
And Pam has subsequently clarified this, but I
Yeah.
just asked that she talk about it a little bit because I don't know if everybody on this call is aware. There has been, as we all remember, after the initial Navigant report, there was an effort to sort of unbundle some services that had been previously bundled together. One of those services was attendant care in the HCB waiver, but that wasn't the only one, but that is a prime focus of that. And then Pam testified at the last task force meeting that since EVV has been implemented, that there may not be a need for that anymore. So I was just hoping that Pam could talk a little bit about that for those who maybe weren't able to hear that.
And that was, that's specific to, as you said, Amy, HCB. Prior to HCB transitioning to HCB2 in 2016, there was 3 services. There was personal care, homemaking, and attendant care. In HCB2, so beginning towards the end of 2016, all of those services were rolled into attendant care. So there was discussion in waiver redesign about splitting those out again, but still having all of the services, but instead, if an individual just needed help with personal care, then it would be personal care, it would be homemaking, that not everybody would be getting attendant care, which is more of a, a supervision, general supervision type service where you're still providing everything the individual needs. With EVV, we have just decided, and we've looked at the services that are being provided, and then in the maintenance of effort on the provider side, and made the decision that it's easier just to keep that service bundled together as attendant care, which would allow someone to receive, if it's, maybe they need 8 hours of care while they have a loved one that is working or out of the home, or whether they maybe just need 2 hours or 4 hours of help, 2 to 3 days a week with, personal assistance and maybe going to the grocery or homemaking or IADL type tasks. So instead of it being split, it's going to remain the one service.
Okay, well, that's easy enough. Thank you, Pam. TAC representation on the 1915 task force. Amy, do you know who are the representatives now on that task force? How are they identified?
So the task force is a legislative task force. So all of the members of the task force are legislators. It is chaired by a member of the Senate and a member of the House. The Senate chair is Senator Julie Rocky Adams. The House member is Senator Steve Riley. And if you'll remember, they also chaired the Exceptional Supports Task Force, which ran last interim, which sort of precipitated this task force happening. So all the members are legislators, and throughout the life of the task force, the legislators have invited individuals or trade associations, et cetera, to come testify. I personally, Pam, I believe, has testified at almost every meeting. I've testified on behalf of the Kentucky Association of Private Providers at almost every meeting. We've had providers that have testified and from all the waivers except Model 2. I believe that's the only waiver that's not had a provider come testify. Individuals have come and testified. The Commonwealth Council on Developmental Disabilities has testified. PNA has testified. DDID, Commissioner Lee. I don't think I'm leaving anybody out, but Pam, if I've left a big group out that you remember that's testified, let me know. So the last meeting was last month, and now the task force will come up with proposed findings and recommendations. That means that they'll the findings are kind of conclusions that the task force has come to as a result of all the testimony they've heard. And the recommendations are recommended actions or pieces of legislation to file during the 2022 legislative session. We also hope that the task force will renew itself for the next interim to come up with long-term rate/funding solutions. So as the task force, we've talked a lot about short-term help for providers, immediate fixes that can help them right now, while realizing that we need some real long-term structural changes and in funding solutions in place to ensure that our waiver programs have the longevity and support they need to be available for decades. So that's kind of the update on that. If I'm leaving anything out or I've failed to address something, please let me know.
Amy, would you say then the information gathering for this task force is winding down? They've gathered all the information they believe they need before they make some recommendations?
Yes, yes.
So are you asking then someone from TAC to actually be a member of the task force or to speak to the task force?
No, so my suggestion was initially that the TAC should consider submitting findings and recommendations to the MAC, not the 1915C task force, but submitting recommendations to the MAC about workforce rates, ARPA funds, et cetera, for the MAC to consider, because that is a function of this TAC that they may do that.
This TAC we're speaking, I mean, you're speaking of the IDD TAC, right?
Yes.
That we should formulate some recommendations at this meeting to take to the MAC?
Or at any meeting, but I don't
Will
believe
there
that you need
some more meetings coming up before the task
No,
force?
what I'm saying is that you, as the IDD TAC, should submit, findings or ideas or recommendations to the MAC, the Medicaid Advisory Committee, addressing some of the serious problems that are happening right now with IDD services.
Right.
So that the MAC can consider those.
Right. Are you suggesting we make those recommendations today or we wait for another meeting?
I think you have to have a quorum to be able to vote to do that.
All right. So how long, that's true. And when will, is there a final date for this, our TAC to provide recommendations for this purpose?
To the MAC? I mean, I think
at some point it's going to be finalized, right? The 1915 task force recommendations.
Well, I'm just suggesting that this task force submit findings to the MAC, not necessarily related to the 1915 task force, but just related, generally speaking, to what's happening with waiver services, et cetera.
Okay. Regardless of what the task force does or when it does it.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, we'll try to make sure we have a quorum at our next meeting, and this might be a good time just to throw out some ideas as to what kind of recommendations we want. I suppose among other things, that's the 25% rate across the board rate increase with the exception of residential 1, which would remain the same. Would that be one of those recommendations, presumably?
Or if the TAC chooses to make that recommendation, I think that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I just thought we might talk about some of those right now before we have our next meeting and make sure we drum up a quorum for it. Any other ideas as to what we might recommend to the MAC at our next meeting? Okay. I guess we can move on to waiting list then.
Okay, for Michelle P, we are up to 7,490 on the waiting list. 74% of those are under 21. We actually just went through a round of allocations. I guess it was in September. We'll at the end of this month, beginning of December, we'll look at how many spots we have left. But we actually have allocated over 800 slots just this year. So we continue to allocate, but we also continue to add to the waiting list. For SCL, there's a total of 2,939 on the waiting list. None in the emergency category, 115 in urgent, and 2,824 in future planning.
Could you
Okay.
repeat that last number again?
So for SCL, there's total of 2,939, 0 in emergency, 115 in urgent, and 2,824 in the future planning category.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm sorry, I see some questions here on the chat that I have overlooked. Can you disclose what will be included in the Appendix K, in the Appendix K amendment? Do you know what exactly is going to be included in the Appendix K amendment you're referring to, Pam?
It specifically will be addressing rates.
Okay.
So immediate relief of providers is what the focus is. None of the flexibilities that have already been granted are going away. So for example, the additional amount for residential, that stays the same. The expansion of home delivered meals, that stays the same. So we're not changing or taking away any of the current flexibilities, just adding to them.
Regarding the question on case management, if I understood you correctly, Pam, that maybe you're going to bring the rate for case management all to be all consistent among the different waivers.
Yeah, there will not be any and there will not. I think if that was the question that Myra had, there will not be any decreases in any of the rates.
Right. But was there going to be some attempt to make all the rates consistent? Did you mention that, Pam?
We are going to be looking at that, yes.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I would encourage everyone to send in recommendations to the CAP to take to the MAC eventually. And is there a list of providers who are certified to provide home delivered meals? Do you know that, Pam?
There is, let me, I will get the link to where that is, and we can, and actually there was just an announcement that went out, I believe on Thursday or Friday of last week. We've added a large Mom's Meals has just been onboarded to provide home delivered meals, and there was an announcement that went out about how to access those.
Well, if there's nothing else, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.